Lord Tremendous here, and I got another book review here for you. This one is called Unlovely. It's by Risa Faye. It is about 174 pages. It was published on November 10th of 2018, and it falls under the horror, mental illness, and sexual abuse genres. I think a little bit of thriller with a touch of romance is in it as well. However, that's what it's currently listed under on Amazon. I got it on Kindle Unlimited with my subscription. However, for $2.99 you can get it on ebook and $9.99 in paperback form, which is not terrible considering. I was reached out. The author reached out to me through a Facebook group that I'm a part of, so I have had communication with this author. And although I'd never read anything by her until this book, she asked me to check it out, and she did warn me. She said it's a dark fantasy-esque book with a sub thread of romance in there. And she wasn't wrong. It is definitely dark fantasy, super dark fantasy. I compare it to H. Lovecraft in a big way, and with a little bit of a more relationship vibe to it, definitely. But it's, in my opinion, a way to build the foundation of the main character. So the main character is this girl, 18-year-old girl named Cora, and she is super abused. Just super abused. So at no point does the book try to make her out as any kind of like super strong individual or super confident or anything along those lines. Just like in Lovecraft, she's beat down bad. She's 18 years old. She just escaped from her family. I'll get more into detail in the spoiler section. I'm just going to do, the rough synopsis thing. But yeah, she ends up in this small town, and yeah, she brought all her demons with her. She tries to adjust. She gets this little cottage out in the middle of the woods. It's supposedly haunted and all that stuff, but really, she's the one that's haunted. It's great. She tries to get a job. That doesn't work out. And just some of it, there's a section of the book where it's a big bunch of romance between her and this, we'll say, guy. And like I said, I don't want to go too deep because it's this book really hinges on you not knowing what's happening. That makes it so good. Because I'll admit, first and foremost, when I was reading it and I got to like past the beginning was interesting. It does catch your attention. It builds a foundation for this character. But then the beginning of the middle, it kind of, for me, it was too much romance. It was too much sappiness, too much love. I was getting a little aggravated because I was like, well, I was told that this was dark fantasy with a hint of romance, and it's becoming a romance novel with a hint of dark fantasy. I even kind of lamented to my wife about it a little bit, and she's like, well, just, finish it. And I was like, yeah. But I'm glad I stuck with it because, wow. So I believe that it's the romance part is fine. It's just not something that I, as a reader in particular, am interested in. However, since it's my review, I have to point that out in order to be completely honest. So I'm honestly leaning towards a 2-star when I get to this part, because I'm just not enjoying the book. It's not bad or anything. I'm just not enjoying it. And then the curtain drops. All sorts of left field stuff happens. And I start to realize, even during the romance part, there were hints being dropped by the author the whole time that really didn't make any sense until you had the context of the rest of the story, which is why you got to stick with it. And oh my God, some horrible things happen to this girl. And like I said, it is 100% Cthulhu-based Lovecraft, and it's something else, let me tell you. It was great. The last 40% or so was absolutely phenomenal. I'd say probably the last half of the book. Once you started understanding all the clues. And if you so when you sit down with a Lovecraft novel, you know Lovecraft. You know what you're getting into. I've talked to this author via Facebook group a few times and stuff like that. But of course, I don't know her writing or anything like that. So I had no idea what I was getting into. I'm really glad that I got to read this book. Oh my God. After I got done reading it, it actually messed me up a little bit. I had to sit down and think, wow, that was that was something else that I just went through there. I haven't been through something like that since reading some Lovecraft stuff. So, yeah, yeah, well done. Very well done. Not everything about the book is, fireworks and snowflakes, though. The author tends to use really obscure vocabulary, like really odd words. One of which, like thanks to Kindle Fire, you click and hold on the word and it'll give you the definition. I had to do that quite a few times in this book, and I don't have the best vocabulary in the world. I'll be the first one to admit it, but one of the words was from 16th century France. Okay, it's just the word usage somewhat in this book. It was too much showing off. The story is how you can show off. The story was more than enough for you to show off with. The word usage, periodically throughout the book, the words were so obscure, so rarely used that very few people are going to follow what that is, and it literally brought me to a screaming halt. You're reading a book, you're into the flow, the picture's in your mind, and you run into a word and your brain just rejects it as gibberish, and it's jarring, it takes you out of the moment. That would be something I would go back and change. Yeah, I'm not saying use, third grade words and nothing higher, but if you're writing a book and that kind of literature isn't used in the for the majority of the book, or that's not how it's supposed to be read, don't use the big words. Don't use the weird obscure 16th century French words that most people, the majority of your readers, aren't going to be able to follow without looking it up. It's just, it doesn't add anything to the story, and when you're writing a book for the masses, for mass consumption and stuff like that, you want to keep the vocabulary familiar. Like I said, you could go and use some lesser used words, but when you're going 400 or 500 years in the past in order to pick out a word to describe something, it's jarring, it's painful, and I did not like that. Other than that, though, the grammar, just a little bit here and there, not bad, not horrible or anything like that. Some of the word uses between was and were off, but again, super rare, so it's not a big deal. And this is a first edition where you're going to have errors like that, so that's not a big deal at all. I don't take any points off for that because this was actually a very well edited book. I didn't notice any punctuation. I didn't notice any spelling errors. The biggest problem was some of the word usage was just mind boggling. But all in all, at the very end of the book, it was riveting. I mean, probably a little bit too much information here, but I had to use the bathroom for the last 40% or so of the book, and I held it because I wanted to see what was going to happen next. I was just like, ooh, ooh. So, my overall rating for this book is going to be 4.5 stars out of 5. And the only reason it's not 5 is, well, the reasons it's not a 5 is because, honestly, in my opinion, the romance section in the beginning of the middle of the book was just too long. I do admit that it was in order to build up everything. It is definitely part of the Lovecraftian storytelling, but it was just too much for me, and if it wasn't for the review, there's a very good chance I would have put the book down, and maybe moved on to something else just simply because it lost my interest. That's not why I picked this book up. I picked the book up because I wanted dark fantasy and horror, not this big sap story between this lunatic 18-year-old and her boy toy. It does all fit into the story, but it was a part that drug it down for me. And also, like I said, the vocabulary usage. Other than that, though, this story was a mind blower. It really kind of cracked my skull a little bit. It was at the end of the book, I was like, oh man, damn. So 4.5 stars out of 5. I'm going to play an ad, and then I'm going to get right into the spoilers, so buckle up. All right, in case you guys didn't already know, I am a self-published author, which is why I'm so passionate about self-published books. It's available on Amazon.com and paperback, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. If you're interested, the link's in the description. I'd really appreciate it. Checked out, left a review. So get ready, spoilers are coming up next, so if you're still here and the music stops, it's your fault. All right. right, you're still here, so let's get into the spoilers. So, like I said, the book starts off, and the main character is Cora. She's an 18-year-old girl who has been horribly abused by her parents her entire life. Her father is an alcoholic rapist, simple as that, and in the worst possible way. And her mother is a deranged, verbally and mentally abusive scumbag. Like, horrible things. Tells her all the time that she's ugly, no man will ever want her, she's a burden to her parents, she better hope that her mom never gets pregnant again, or else there'll be no reason to keep her around. It is heinous what she tells this girl, so much so that well, between what her mom is saying to her and her dad is doing to her, her mind has cracked, her mind has snapped, understandably, but she's barely functioning. She does know that she wants to get away, and she does have a journal that she keeps all these notes in on how to escape and yada yada yada. So basically, she's fled from her parents. She steals money from them over a few weeks and is able to escape. That's the story she tells her. She believes that she's a very unlovable, unlikable, and unattractive person, and the story gets in a lot of detail proving all that throughout the book. So you had never. She's crazy. Okay, you need to understand. Sanity is -50. But yeah, she flees her parents because she knows the abuse is wrong. Although she believes everything her mother says, of course, her mother has told her all about mirrors and how mirrors are the gateways for the outworld gods and the aliens to get to her and stuff like that. So never look too long into a mirror, yada, yada, yada. That comes into play later. So she's fled her parents. She gets to this small town in the middle of friggin' nowhere. She rents a cottage, and the way she's able to rent it is because it's dirt cheap because the town believes it's haunted. Well, read the story, and that'll be up to you to decide. So she sets up shop in this house, and she cleans all the there's some furniture and stuff in it. She cleans it all up and everything, and she feels good. She feels happy. She's away from her family. She's nervous that they're gonna find her, but she's feeling pretty good because there's no paper trail. There's no way for them to find her. It's smart. This is a book set in present day, as far as I can tell. So the author is keeping track of all this stuff, and I like that. So she goes into town and she meets this guy at a general store where she applies for a job to work there. Front desk or not front desk, stocking and running the register. Old guy, nice enough dude, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll hire you. So she starts this job right away. She's pretty good at it. It's organizing, it's cleaning, and it's dealing with the customer. And while she hates dealing with the customers and stuff like that, she's able to do it. And the reason she hates dealing with people is because she's an introvert. She's got zero self-confidence, zero self-worth, and she thinks people are looking at her because she's hideous. And this is where you get your first hint that she's gorgeous, because the people are constantly looking at her, smiling at her, being, hey, how you doing? Trying to, they're shy around her and stuff like that. And she's completely missing all that because in her mind, she's some sort of Gorgon. And the author nails that. So eventually, while she's working there, this guy comes in that's around her age, right? And he's kind of moping around the shop, looking at her, kind of side, hey, real shy. He's trying to smile at her, trying to see if there's an opening, and she's no opening. She thinks that he's mocking her. He comes up to her eventually to buy whatever it is that he's buying, and she's like, so what time do you get off of work? Trying desperately to, get a date with her or whatnot. And she misinterprets that as him being sarcastic, being cruel, taking a shot at her because of how ugly she is and all this other stuff. And she doesn't answer him. She hands him his change, hands him his receipt, doesn't say a word, and dude gets offended. He thinks he's getting rejected by a girl that thinks she's better than him. So he mouths off to her, you think you're better than me, I've got a better job than you better recognize, blah, 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 and storms out. So she's upset because she's like, why do men have to be so cruel? Can't I just be ugly in peace? Woe is me. And the old guy who owns the store walks out and sees that she's on the verge of tears. And he's like, what happened? Are you okay? And she's like, she's nodding, trying to brush it off because she doesn't want to engage with this guy. And he's like, if that guy said something to you, let me know. And she's like, no, just leave me alone. You know, he looked at me. He looked at me and I'm ugly. And the old dude's like, what? Who told you that? And she goes, everybody. Isn't it obvious? Don't be mean. And he's like, it's not true. You're not ugly. Who told? Like, the old guy is a decent old man, you know? And she flips out on him, snaps, screams at him, tells him basically, absolute real accurate directions on how he can go to hell, and runs out of there, like just takes off, quits basically, and runs off. Old man is confused out of his mind. She runs all the way back to her cottage in the woods and stuff like, and the people are looking at her like concerned, but she interprets it as them mocking her, like laughing at her, like, oh, look at the ugly witch, run back to her hovel, that's right, leave us pretty people alone. And when really these people are just looking at her with concern, like, is she okay? But of course nobody tries to stop her because she's a raving lunatic. So she gets back to her cottage and she just holes up there, right? She doesn't go anywhere, she doesn't do anything. And when she gets there, the voices start coming after her, like all sort crazy ass voices, and they're saying some pretty heinous stuff. While they're all screaming at her, this guy manifests inside the mirrors, and he's like, "You're not ugly. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I love you. I want to be with you." Of course, she snaps at him. She's like, "Why aren't you here?" Blah blah blah. Long story short, he's from the mirror realm, she's in our realm, and he's been watching her his entire her entire life, and he's in love with her, and he knows everything that happened to her, and he would have protected her if he could, but he can't, and all he wants to do is be with her now and love her and blah blah blah. And that's the start of what you think is a months long courting thing, where it's like romance and love and sappiness, and you know, he comes to her in her dreams, and they have sex and all that stuff, and it's yada 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 of romance. But it's, there are hints, there are clues inside there that I you know, 100% admit that I missed at first, because I just read over. I'm like, okay, great. So the crazy lady's got some inconsistencies and everything that's happening, and the guy is slipping up a little bit, who may or may not even be there. You don't know for sure. But eventually they fall deeply in love, and she wants to be with him. He wants to be with her, but they can't because they're in different realms. Although he can be there in her dreams, and occasionally he shows up there. Although invisible, he's there. She can feel his presence and all this other stuff the entire time they're there. This relationship eventually, you know, devolves into a weird Joker Harlequin type of thing, where he becomes kind of possessive, and he protects her from the voices and stuff like that, keeping him at bay, which just she swoons to him for. And their relationship builds and builds and builds to the point where she's like, I want to be with you, I need to be with you, you need to be with me, yada yada yada. And he's like, well, there's a way to do it, but you know, it's kind of difficult, and she doesn't really press him on it right away. She's like, well, maybe I'll ask him about it later if it's that difficult. So things start going real left field. She believes that the old man that she used to work for is reading her thoughts, reading her mind from his weird command center somewhere in the office of the what's it called, of the general store. So in order to protect her, she believes that her man Theod, Thaed, I may be saying it wrong, I think it's Theod, he tells her about sympathetic magic, which basically is, if he does something in his realm, it happens in our realm. And so he burns down the old man's shop in his realm, which causes his shop in our realm to burn down, and he dies in the fires, what he tells her. But then later on in the story, he shows up at her house as kind of like a zombie, and she has to push him into a well at Theod's insistence in order to get rid of everything that's happened, or get rid of the evidence, so that when they come looking for the old guy, he doesn't, you know, she doesn't get arrested for murder and all this stuff. And then they move this car into a pond and stuff like that, and it's just lunacy. So once that all happens, they're like, she's enamored with this guy, and she wants to just have him around all the time. So she orders a whole bunch of mirrors and puts them up all over the house that she's staying in, the cottage that she's staying in, because that's how they see each other. And once that happens, her insanity really opens up. And this is where the book really starts getting good, because all sorts of image, like really, really good imagery about how everything's made out of like some sort of surrealistic nightmare. There's weird animals and critters and magic and fireflies and shit. I'm sorry, everywhere. Just like in coming from his realm into ours, and there's all these rules about what can and cannot work, which get broke all the time, but that's intentional. The author is showing you that this Theod guy is full of it, and Cora, she's so broken, she's so messed up that she's just like, okay, I don't understand. Like, part of her is like, this is some bull, but the other part of her, the bigger part of her, is like, but I need to believe it because this is the only person in the world that'll ever love me, and yada yada yada. It's really masterfully done. And then eventually he pushes her to the point where he's like, listen, you need to come to me, and the only way for you to do that is to go through that well, the same one that you dumped Mr. Phillips' body into, the old man from the store who she thought was killed. Or that she killed or whatever. This well is a portal from my realm, or from your realm into my realm, and it only works one way, and you need to do this. And he gets really aggressive, really mean. He really cuts at her, and eventually he exposes himself for who he really is. He tells her he's her pain and insanity all and misery all wrapped into one. And while part of her is like, oh my god, that's who this is, the bigger part of her is like, no, he's the man that I love. And so she keeps pushing forward. And so eventually, after a lot of debating and some real twisted stuff, like the timeline seems wrong and everything, it's twisted. Like 1 minute she thinks months have passed, but it's like, wow, it was just daytime and now it's night, what's going on? She finds herself at this well, getting ready to throw herself in, and she has this moment of clarity where she remembers exactly why she left her family's house, what happened the last time her father tried to molest her and stuff like that. Turns out that she kind of fought back a little bit and really hurt her dad, and then she ran away because of that, which is great because a lot of those clues are seeded in throughout the book, throughout the story, that you go, oh. So she goes to the edge, she strips down naked, she goes to the edge of this well, and she's sitting on this well, like debating, like her brain, part of her brain, that big part, or that little part that's like, wait, you're crazy, don't do this. It's like, you'll die if you do this. But Theod's there, like right at her ear, going, do it. I need you to jump into the well, blah, blah, blah. And he starts to lose it a little bit. And just as she's about to push herself off into the well, after much debate, he grabs her. And it turns out that Thade is some twisted Lovecraftian Cthulhu monster. The tentacles all over her and everything like that. And she falls down this well. She cracks her head off the side, splashes down in there, and basically dies. Like he feeds off her misery and torment and betrayal and everything like that. And she's just surrounded by this murky green water that's just filled up her lungs, and she dies. And it's like, oh wow. So in the epilogue at the end, right? No. Well, yes and no. Again, Lovecraft. So she's the old man is fine. The everything that you thought that happened throughout the book has all been in this lunatic's mind, which you can kind of see happening. There's plenty of hints towards that, and you kind of think that maybe that's a possibility, or at least I did, but I wasn't for sure. Because again, I didn't realize what kind of story I'd gotten my hands on. It's truly a tale of madness, as it says on the cover. So anyway, the old man had followed her back to her house to figure out where she lived, and then a couple days later, when he hadn't seen from her, hadn't heard from her, or anything like that, he called the cops, and they went over there and did a wellness check, and sure enough, she's sitting on a rocking chair in this cottage, catatonic, like non-responsive. She's not dead, but she's just mind blown. Like, mind has just given up. Her brain could not tolerate anymore. So the cop is talking to the old man, Mr. Phillips from the general store. He's like, it's a good thing you followed her because this is bad, man. She's out of it. She's catatonic as hell. And he's like, what's wrong with her? She's schizophrenic. Is there something going on? And he's like, well. And he points to a picture on the mantle of her parents, her and her parents, and he's like, it turns out that we just found that her mom had murdered her dad with an iron, and that's a big part of the story. Whenever you hear about the mom is always ironing, constantly ironing. Well, it turns out her lunatic mom killed her rapist dad with the iron because the aliens told her to do it. And they found out that the daughter was missing. They found her journal. They believed that there was some, molestation and rape going on from the dad, at least according to the journal. But, they were looking for her because her dad got her pregnant, and, they kind of had an inkling that that was the problem. That was the last coherent thought in the journal and stuff. So sure enough, Cora's pregnant, catatonic in this chair, and so that's why the cop is like, the docs aren't going to care about her mental state right away because right now preserving this baby is what's gonna take precedence. And the guy at the general store is like, damn. I didn't even realize that she was, pregnant or whatever. And the cop is like, well, no, of course not. She's beautiful. You were probably paying attention to something else, which of course the general store guy is like, oh, whatever, shut up. And so, turns out that this Cora chick is not ugly. She's gorgeous. She's just there's plenty of hints towards that throughout the entire book. In fact, the Thead guy even kind of tells her, constantly, no, you're not ugly. What the hell is, you're crazy. And so they wheel her off in the gurney into the back of the ambulance. She's laying down or whatever. The general store guy and the cop are talking a little bit, and all of a sudden she sits up, and her eyes are all bulging, and she's clawing at her throat. She can't breathe. And the paramedics and everything are trying to figure out what's going on, what's wrong. And, she falls out dead, and all this green water, just like the green water from the well, starts leaking out of her and everything like that. And so you got, it's like, no, it turned out the Cthulhu guy went after her. It's just, I'm glossing over a lot because I want you to read this book. If you like this kind of dark Cthulhu-esque type of storyline, it's kind of it is a mind messer with her. I'm trying not to swear. But yeah, it's really good. It threw me off. I was not expecting this at all, especially when I ran into the romance section of it. It got really sappy. It was kind of over the top for me in some places. Not unrealistic, just it's not something that it would appeal to me because I'm not a romantic guy. What can I tell you? I don't know if you could tell that by the way I talk. But it was like, I'm not enjoying this. But then it really kind of kicks into overdrive to make up for that. And I don't know if you can tell, but I was really excited about the story. I don't want to give away too much, although I've already given up a lot, because the book is definitely worth reading. And at, Kindle Unlimited for free, or what is it, like $2.99 for an ebook and $9.99 for a paperback, it's not going to hurt you to check it out at all. Link is in the description. This book did, like I said, have a few problems. I did not like the word choices. There was just too many times where I'd get stumped by a word and I'm like, well, maybe it's just my vocabulary. No, the word is so ancient, so unused, so obscure that 99% of the population, all right, I'll be generous, 90% of the population probably doesn't use that word. And unfortunately, that throws off the flow of the whole story, and that's frustrating. And like I said, the romance side just bogging down the story really ate at me. I didn't notice any misspellings. There weren't any real format or punctuation or anything like that. There was a few grammar thing, was instead of were instead of was, stuff like that, but very, very few. This book was very well edited. It's just some of the vocabulary choices, some of the word choices, I think hurt the story rather than helped it out, rather than supported it, and it just wasn't necessary for a story that honestly, in my opinion, impresses enough on its own. So 4.5 out of 5 stars, solid book, solid rating, and I'm looking forward to more. I really am. This was fantastic. That's going to do it for this one. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, feel free to put them down in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. But as always, thanks.